original story narrated exclusively for Love Written in Silence. The iron key weighed nothing in Eliza Thornton's hand, but when she placed it on the auction house table before Adrian Calder, Earl of Stonebridge, 32, watching from the last row as 700 acres and 8 centuries of his family's name fell to the gavel. The sound it made against oak silenced 40 men. She did not ask if he remembered her. She did not need to. His eyes found hers, and recognition struck like a blow. The steward's daughter, 16, the last time he saw her. Now 28, and standing in the room that had just made her the owner of everything he'd lost. "Earn it back, Lord Stonebridge," she said, and walked out while the room held its breath. The auction house smelled of cigar smoke and old wood, and the particular silence that follows ruin. Adrian Calder sat in the last row with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes on the auctioneer's table, where the deed to Stonebridge Park lay beside a brass gavel worn, smooth by decades of use. Stonebridge Park, the auctioneer read. 700 acres manor house, tenant farms, timber rights, and all improvements thereon. Opening bid at £4,000. Adrian did not move. He had nothing to bid. The solicitors had made that clear 3 weeks ago, when they'd laid the accounting books before him, and shown him what 8 years of neglect looked like rendered in numbers. His father had dismissed the steward. Adrian had inherited the consequences, and never once asked what had happened to the man who'd held the estate together for 31 years. The room murmured. Men leaned forward. Geoffrey Pemberton sat 3 rows ahead, confident and still, a man who owned debts the way other men owned horses. 4,000, someone called. 4,200. 4,005. Adrian watched the numbers climb. The gavel hovered. The auctioneer scanned the room one final time. Sold to Harding and Associates for £6,400. The gavel struck. The sound rang through the hall like a church bell. A woman rose from the front row beside a gray-haired solicitor Adrian recognized as Mr. Harding. She was perhaps 28, dark hair pinned severely, dressed in a plain, wool gown the color of charcoal. Her posture was excellent. She crossed the room without hurry, her boots clicking against the floorboards, and stopped before the auctioneer's table. She took the iron key from the velvet cloth, where it lay. Then she turned and walked directly toward Adrian. Every man in the room watched her. She stopped 2 feet from where he sat. Her eyes were gray. He had seen those eyes before. She held out the key. "Earn it back, Lord Stonebridge." He stared at her, at the key, at her face. Recognition arrived like cold water. "Eliza Thornton." "Miss Thornton," she corrected. "And it is my estate now." She did not wait for him to respond. She turned to face the room, her voice clear and steady. "Stonebridge Park will resume operations within the fortnight. Tenant contracts will be honored. Anyone with questions may direct them to Mr. Harding." She walked toward the door. The solicitor gathered his papers and followed. The room did not breathe until the door closed behind her. Adrian sat in the last row with the iron key in his hand, and the weight of 8 centuries pressing against his chest. The steward's daughter had just bought his world. 2 days later, Adrian stood in the estate office at Stonebridge Park and understood for the first time what his father's steward had actually done. The room was small, tucked into the eastern wing of the manor house, with windows that overlooked the tenant farms and walls, lined with shelves holding 30 years of field notebooks, surveying instruments, and ledgers bound in cracked leather. A single desk dominated the center of the room, oak scarred by use, with a brass lamp and an inkwell that had left permanent stains in the wood grain. Eliza Thornton sat behind that desk now. She did not look up when Adrian entered. "Close the door," she said. He closed it. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." He sat. She slid a document across the desk. "The management contract. 6 months. You will serve as estate manager under my authority. You will reside in the steward's cottage. Your salary will be £50 per annum, contingent on measurable improvements to tenant welfare and crop yields." Adrian looked at the contract, at the terms written in precise legal script, at the signature line waiting at the bottom. "You want me to work for you. I want you to work for the estate. The same work my father did for 31 years, while your family lived in the manor house, and signed what solicitors placed before you." Her voice was calm. There was no anger in it. "That made it worse. You are offering me my own family's land. I am offering you the chance to learn what stewardship actually means. My father knew every tenant by name. He knew which fields drained poorly in spring. He knew when Mrs. Briggs needed her roof repaired before she asked. He knew because he walked the land every day for 3 decades. You have never walked it once. Adrian's jaw tightened. Your father was dismissed. Your father dismissed him. Without investigation. Without reference. For an accounting discrepancy, my father could not explain, because explaining would have required your father to ask a question. What question? Why a man who served Stonebridge for 31 years would suddenly become a thief. The air between them grew heavy with unspoken history. Eliza leaned forward. Her hands were folded on the desk, steady and still. You will report to me each morning at 6. You will learn crop rotations, boundary maintenance, tenant relations, and estate accounting. You will do the work, not delegate it. Not sign papers while someone else manages the details. You will do it yourself. And if I refuse, then you walk away. Stonebridge continues without you, and you lose the only path back to your family's name. Adrian looked at her, at the woman who had grown up in the steward's cottage, learned yields at her father's knee, and built herself into someone who could buy an earl's estate at auction without flinching. Why, he asked. Why offer me anything at all? Her expression did not change. Because the estate needs someone who will stay. Someone who has a reason to care, whether it survives. You are the last Calder. If you walk away, Stonebridge is just another investment. If you stay, it might become something worth saving. She pushed the contract forward another inch. 6 months. Prove you can do the work. Prove the title means something beyond a name in a registry. Or prove it does not. Adrian picked up the pen. His hand was steady. He signed. Eliza took the contract, folded it, and placed it in a drawer. The steward's cottage is ready. Move in tomorrow. Bring what you need. Leave the rest. When do I begin? You began the moment you signed. She stood. The meeting was over. Adrian rose and walked to the door. His hand was on the latch when she spoke again. My father loved this estate. It killed him to leave it. You will not dishonor his work while you are here. He turned. She was standing beside the desk, her hands at her sides, her face composed. I understand. I do not think you do. But you will. He left. The door closed behind him. The iron key hung on a peg beside the frame. Neither of them had touched it. The steward's cottage sat at the eastern edge of the estate grounds, a quarter-mile from the manor house, separated by a line of oak trees and a stone wall that marked the boundary between the family's world and the world of those who served it. Adrian had never been inside. The cottage was plain. 2 rooms downstairs, a sitting room with a hearth, and a kitchen with an iron stove, and 2 rooms upstairs beneath a sloped roof. The furniture was functional. A narrow bed, a writing desk, a table with 2 chairs, shelves holding dishes, and a few books. The walls were whitewashed. The floors were clean. Thomas Thornton's surveying tools still hung on pegs beside the door. A compass, a measuring chain, a leather satchel worn smooth by decades of use. Adrian set his trunk beside the bed and looked around the room where Eliza Thornton had grown up. This was where she had learned to read yields, where she had sat at her father's knee and memorized crop rotations, where she had watched her father come home each night with mud on his boots and satisfaction in his eyes, because he had done work that mattered. Adrian had never done work that mattered. A knock sounded at the door. He opened it. Eliza stood on the threshold, holding a stack of leather-bound notebooks. My father's field records, she said. 31 years of Stonebridge, rendered in detail. Start with these. You will need them tomorrow. She held them out. He took them. The leather was soft with age, the spines cracked from use. Thank you. She nodded once and turned to leave. Miss Thornton. She stopped. Why did your father not explain the discrepancy? Her back was to him. She did not turn around. Because explaining would have required him to admit he used his own savings to cover a tenant shortfall during a bad winter. Because admitting that would have exposed that he exceeded his authority. Because a steward does not tell an earl that the estate failed and the steward paid the price to keep it standing. She walked away. The sound of her boots faded across the gravel path. Adrian closed the door and sat at the writing desk. He opened the first notebook. The handwriting was meticulous. Each page recorded the date, The weather, the fields surveyed, the tenants visited, the repairs completed. Notes in the margins. Mrs. Briggs needs firewood before winter. South pasture gate loose. Drainage poor in west field after heavy rain. 31 years of a man's life. Written in careful script. Each entry proof that Thomas Thornton had known this land with an intimacy Adrian had never approached. He read until the candle burned low, and his eyes ached. Then he closed the notebook, and lay in the narrow bed, and stared at the ceiling, and understood for the first time that he had inherited a title, but never learned what it meant to earn it. Outside, the wind moved through the oak trees. Somewhere in the manor house, Eliza Thornton sat at her father's desk and prepared for the work that would begin at dawn. Both of them were locked in now. She could not fail without losing her entire investment and her brother's apprenticeship bond. He could not leave without forfeiting the only path back to his name. The estate would test them both. Daily work began at 6. Adrian learned quickly that stewardship meant mud. Eliza met him at the cottage door before sunrise, dressed in a wool coat and sturdy boots, her hair pinned beneath a plain bonnet. She did not greet him. She simply turned and began walking toward the western tenant farms. He followed. She showed him how to read soil drainage by the way water pooled after rain, how to recognize frost damage in wheat before it became visible to an untrained eye, how to repair a gate so it would hold through winter, how to speak to tenant farmers who remembered when a Thornton's word meant something and a Calder's word meant nothing. He was terrible. She did not soften her standards. "The hinge is loose," she said, crouching beside a pasture gate, while Adrian hammered a nail that refused to seat properly. "If you do not secure it now, the gate will fail in a week, and the sheep will scatter. I am securing it. You are bending the nail. Stop. Watch." She took the hammer from his hand, positioned the nail, and drove it home with 3 clean strikes. "Feel the resistance. When it changes, the nail is seated. If you force it, you damage the wood." She handed the hammer back. He tried again. The nail bent. She did not sigh. She simply took the hammer again and finished the repair herself. They walked the boundary lines at dawn. She showed him her father's methods for marking property corners, for clearing drainage channels, for identifying which trees needed felling before winter storms brought them down across roads. The tenants watched him with suspicion. Mrs. Briggs, a widow in her 60s who farmed 12 acres of barley, turned her back when he entered her cottage. She spoke only to Eliza. "The roof is sound, Miss Thornton. Your father saw to it before." She stopped before he left. "I am glad to hear it," Eliza said gently. "If you need anything this winter, send word." Mrs. Briggs glanced at Adrian. Her expression hardened. "I will send word to you, Miss Thornton, not to him." Eliza did not correct her. They left. Adrian said nothing until they were halfway across the field. "She hates me. She loved my father. He repaired her roof the winter. Her husband died. He brought firewood when she could not afford it. He made sure her daughter had apprenticeship papers when the girl turned 14. Your family never noticed she existed. I was not here. You were here for 8 years after your father died. You signed the papers. You collected the rents. You never once walked these fields." He had no answer. They continued walking. Weeks passed. Adrian improved slowly. He could repair a gate now without bending every nail. He could read a yield report and understand what the numbers meant. He could recognize when a tenant was struggling before they asked for help. Eliza watched him in the fields. She saw effort becoming competence. She did not praise him, but she stopped correcting every mistake. One afternoon they repaired a boundary wall together, an old stone wall that marked the edge of the estate, built 2 centuries ago and slowly crumbling under the weight of time and weather. Eliza demonstrated her father's technique for setting a capstone. The stone was heavy, perhaps 40 pounds, rough-edged and awkward to hold. "Place your hands here," she said, positioning her own hands on either side of the stone. "Feel the balance. When you lift, the weight should distribute evenly." Adrian placed his hands beside hers. Their fingers were inches apart. He could feel the warmth of her skin through the cold stone. They lifted together. The stone rose. Eliza guided it into position. Adrian held the weight while she adjusted the alignment. His thumb brushed the mortar line, old mortar, laid decades ago, still holding. Your father laid this, he said quietly. Yes, it has lasted. His work always did. They lowered the stone into place. It settled with a solid sound, fitting perfectly into the gap it was meant to fill. Eliza stepped back. Her hands were dusty with stone powder. She wiped them on her coat. That will hold another 50 years, she said. Adrian looked at the wall, at the stone they had set together, at the line of mortar that connected their work to Thomas Thornton's work, unbroken across time. Thank you, he said, for teaching me. She met his eyes. For the first time, her expression softened. You are learning. That is enough. They walked back toward the cottage as the sun set behind the western hills. Neither spoke. The quiet between them was no longer hostile. It was something else. Sir Geoffrey Pemberton arrived on a cold morning in late October. Adrian was in the estate office, reviewing tenant contracts, when the door opened and Geoffrey entered without knocking. He was 42, tall, confident, dressed in a wool coat that cost more than Adrian's annual salary. Lord Stonebridge, Geoffrey said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Or should I call you Mr. Calder now? Adrian set down his pen. Geoffrey, I heard you were working as estate manager. I confess I did not believe it until I saw you walk past my carriage this morning with mud on your boots. Geoffrey sat in the chair across from the desk without being invited. It is a remarkable fall. What do you want? To help you rise again. Eliza entered through the side door. She stopped when she saw Geoffrey. Sir Pemberton, she said coolly, I do not recall inviting you. Geoffrey stood and inclined his head. Miss Thornton, forgive the intrusion. I came to speak with Lord Stonebridge on a matter of mutual interest. Then speak quickly. We have work to do. Geoffrey's smile widened. He was enjoying this. I have a proposal. My niece Constance is 26, well educated, and possesses a dowry of £8,000. She would make an excellent wife for a man of noble birth. He paused. I am prepared to forgive all outstanding debts held against the Stonebridge estate. Additionally, I will provide financial backing to restore the manor house and tenant farms to full operation. In exchange, you marry Constance and resume your position as Earl of Stonebridge. The room was silent. Adrian stared at Geoffrey, at the offer that would erase everything, the debts, the humiliation, the mud on his boots, the easy path, the natural path, the life he was raised to expect. The estate belongs to Miss Thornton, Adrian said carefully, a situation that could be remedied. I have consulted with my solicitors. There are grounds to challenge the auction sale, irregularities in the proxy bidding process. If the sale is overturned, the estate would be resold. I would purchase it and transfer ownership to you as part of the marriage settlement. Eliza's face was stone. The sale was legal. Perhaps, perhaps not. These matters can take months to resolve, during which time the estate remains in limbo. Tenants grow anxious. Investments falter. Geoffrey looked at Adrian. Or you accept my offer. Marry Constance. Restore your family's name. Walk away from this. He gestured at the desk, the ledgers, the mud-stained boots by the door. Unfortunate experiment. Adrian did not answer immediately. He thought of the boundary wall, of Mrs. Briggs's cottage, of the field notebooks stacked beside his bed, of Eliza's hands beside his on the capstone, holding the weight together. I need time to consider, he said. Geoffrey's smile returned. Of course, take a week. I will return for your answer. He left. The door closed behind him. Eliza stood by the window, her back to Adrian. You are considering it, she said quietly. He is offering to erase 8 years of failure. He is offering to erase 6 months of work. Your work. The tenants are beginning to trust you. Mrs. Briggs allowed you into her kitchen last week. That is not nothing. It is not enough to restore my family's name. She turned. Her eyes were gray and cold. Your family's name was built on 8 centuries of people like my father doing the work, while people like you signed papers and collected rents. If you want to restore it, earn it. Do not marry it. She walked out. The door shut with finality. Adrian sat alone in the office and stared at the ledgers and understood that she was right, and that he did not know if being right was enough. Late that night, Adrian could not sleep. He lit a candle and opened another of Thomas Thornton's field notebooks. This one from 1810, 2 years before the dismissal. The entries were meticulous, as always. Crop rotations, tenant visits, repairs completed. Then in February, a note in the margin. Winter brutal. Tenant shortfall in West Farms. Covered from personal savings. Will reconcile accounts in spring. Adrian stared at the words. Covered from personal savings. Thomas Thornton had used his own money to keep tenants from starving. He had created the accounting discrepancy himself. Not through theft, but through generosity. He could not afford. And he had never explained it, because explaining would have required him to admit he had exceeded his authority, that he had acted above his station, that he had cared more about tenant welfare than about maintaining the proper boundaries between a steward and an earl. Adrian closed the notebook. He thought of his father, the old earl, rigid and proud, waiting 3 days for an explanation that never came. Dismissing a good man, because asking further would have meant admitting he depended on his steward, more than his steward depended on him. 2 generations of Calders who could not bear to need someone beneath them, who had destroyed good people through that incapacity. Adrian sat in the steward's cottage and felt the full measure of his inheritance, not land or title, but blindness passed from father to son. He had inherited his father's blindness. He had lived in the manor house for 8 years, and never once asked what had happened to the man who held the estate together. And now Eliza Thornton, Thomas Thornton's daughter, was offering him the chance to learn what her father had known. If he walked away to marry Constance, he would become his father. If he stayed, he might become something else. The next morning, Adrian was late to meet Eliza at the cottage door. She was already walking toward the Western Farms when he caught up to her. "I am not accepting Geoffrey's offer," he said. She did not slow her pace. "Why not?" "Because it would mean walking away from the only thing I have ever earned." She stopped, turned to face him. "You have earned nothing yet. 6 months of work does not erase 8 years of neglect. I know. Geoffrey will challenge the sale whether you accept his offer or not. He wants Stonebridge. He will use every legal means to take it. Then we fight him. You cannot manage the estate and fight a legal battle simultaneously. You need someone who knows the land now. Someone the tenants are beginning to trust." He paused. "You need me." She studied his face. Her expression was unreadable. "If you stay on my terms. No special treatment. No allowances for your title. You are the estate manager. Nothing more. I understand. And if Geoffrey wins, if the sale is overturned, you walk away with nothing. No estate. No title. No wife with a dowry. Nothing. I understand that too." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once and turned back toward the farms. "The south pasture fence needs repair. Bring the tools." He brought the tools. They worked in silence, but the quiet was different now. It was the understanding of 2 people who had chosen to stand together against what was coming. 3 weeks later, a tenant child fell ill. Mr. Hewitt's daughter, 7 years old, small for her age, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's quiet disposition, developed a fever that would not break. The local physician came and went and left medicines that did not help. Eliza arrived at the Hewitt cottage at dusk and found the child burning with fever, her breathing shallow, and labored. "I am staying," Eliza said to Mrs. Hewitt. "Send for me if anything changes." She sat beside the child's bed through the evening and into the night. The fever climbed. The child's breathing grew worse. At midnight, Adrian arrived. He knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. He carried a basket with clean linens, a jar of honey, dried herbs from the manor house kitchen. "I thought you might need these," he said. Eliza looked up from the bedside. Her face was drawn with exhaustion. "Thank you." He set the basket on the table. "Is there anything else I can do?" "No," he nodded and turned to leave. Then he stopped. He sat on the stone floor outside the sickroom door, his back against the wall, and did not move. Eliza glanced at him through the doorway. "You do not need to stay. I know. You should sleep. So should you." She did not argue. She turned back to the child and pressed a cool cloth to the girl's forehead and whispered soft words that Adrian could not hear. He sat on the floor and listened to the sound of her voice, and the child's labored breathing, and the creak of the old cottage, settling in the cold. Hours passed. The fever broke just before dawn. The child's breathing eased. Her eyes opened. She looked at her mother and whispered, "I am thirsty." Mrs. Hewitt wept. Eliza stood slowly, her legs stiff from sitting through the night. She stepped into the hallway and found Adrian still there, his head resting against the wall, his eyes closed. "She is better," Eliza said quietly. He opened his eyes, looked at her. "Good." She sat down beside him on the stone floor, their shoulders pressed together. She was so tired she could barely hold herself upright. He did not move, did not speak, just let her lean against him. She took his hand, held it against her knee in silence. The humblest room on the estate, the most honest moment between them. "Thank you for staying," she whispered. "I will always stay." She closed her eyes, let herself believe him. But the next week, Jeffrey Pemberton filed his legal challenge. The notice arrived via courier, a formal document arguing that the auction sale had been conducted improperly, that Eliza's proxy purchase through Mr. Harding violated county regulations, and that the estate should be resold to a proper buyer. The hearing was set for the county magistrate's chamber in 3 weeks. Eliza read the document twice and set it on her father's desk with hands that did not shake. "He is doing this to force your hand," she said to Adrian. "Accept his offer, and he withdraws the challenge. Refuse, and he takes the estate through legal means. Can he win? I do not know. Mr. Harding believes the sale was legal, but Jeffrey has resources. He can hire barristers who will argue precedent and procedure until the magistrate is too confused to rule clearly. Then we prepare. We gather every document, every witness to the auction, every piece of evidence that proves the sale was legitimate." She looked at him. "If he wins, you lose everything. Your last chance at Stonebridge, your family's name, everything. I lost those things 8 years ago. I am only just beginning to understand what I might earn in their place." She held his gaze. Something shifted in her expression, something that looked almost like hope. "Then we fight." They worked through the night. Mr. Harding arrived the next morning with files and ledgers and correspondence. They built their case methodically, piece by piece, every document cross-referenced and verified. Jeffrey sent another message a week before the hearing. The offer was simple and direct. "Mary Constance, withdraw from the estate. I will withdraw the challenge and compensate Miss Thornton for her investment. You restore your name. She recovers her capital. Everyone benefits." Adrian burned the letter in the hearth. The magistrate's chamber was full. County officials sat along the walls. Tenant farmers crowded the back rows, Mrs. Briggs, Mr. Hewitt, others whose faces Adrian now recognized. Mr. Harding sat at the petitioner's table with Eliza beside him, her expression calm and controlled. Jeffrey sat across from them with 2 barristers in black robes and a stack of legal documents that rose like a fortress. Adrian stood in the gallery. He was not a party to the case. He was only a witness to what would be decided. The magistrate, an older man with gray whiskers and tired eyes, reviewed the documents in silence. Then he looked up. "Sir Pemberton, you challenge the validity of the auction sale. State your grounds." Jeffrey's lead barrister stood. "The sale was conducted through a proxy bidder, acting on behalf of Miss Thornton. County auction regulations require that the purchasing party be present and identified. Miss Thornton's use of Mr. Harding as intermediary violates those regulations. We request the sale be overturned and the property resold under proper supervision." Mr. Harding rose. "The regulations permit proxy bidding, provided the proxy is a licensed solicitor acting under written authority. I hold such authority. The sale was legal in every particular." The barristers argued precedent. They cited cases from other counties, other auctions, other disputes where proxy bidding had been challenged. The magistrate listened with the patience of a man who had heard it all before. Then Jeffrey stood. "If I may address the court directly." The magistrate gestured for him to continue. Jeffrey turned to face Adrian. "Lord Stonebridge, you are the rightful Earl of Stonebridge. Your family has held that estate for 8 centuries. I am offering you the chance to reclaim it. Marry my niece Constance. Accept my financial support. I will withdraw this challenge immediately. The estate returns to you. Miss Thornton recovers her investment with interest. All debts are forgiven." The room turned to Adrian. Every person present understood what was being offered. The easy path, the natural path. The Earl reclaims his name, marries well, and the steward's daughter walks away with compensation. Adrian looked at Jeffrey, at the barristers, at the magistrate. Then he looked at Eliza. She sat at the petitioner's table with her hands folded, her face composed, her eyes steady on his. He walked to the front of the chamber. He stopped before the magistrate's bench. "May I speak?" The magistrate nodded. Adrian turned to the clerk's table. "The transfer deed. May I see it?" The clerk handed him the document. The deed confirming Eliza's ownership of Stonebridge Park, signed by the auctioneer, witnessed by 40 men. Adrian took a pen from the clerk's inkwell. He signed the deed, in the space reserved for the seller's acknowledgement. His signature, clear and deliberate, confirming the transfer as permanent and irrevocable. He handed the deed back to the clerk. The room was silent. Geoffrey stared. "You are giving away your inheritance. I am confirming what was never mine. Stonebridge belongs to Miss Thornton. It was purchased legally. It is hers by right. This challenge has no merit." The magistrate looked at the signed deed, then at Geoffrey. "Sir Pemberton, the seller has confirmed the sale. Do you wish to continue?" Geoffrey's jaw tightened. His barristers whispered urgently. He stood frozen, his carefully constructed strategy collapsing around him. "No, Your Honor. I withdraw the challenge." The magistrate struck his gavel once. "The sale stands. This matter is concluded." The room erupted. Tenant farmers stood and applauded. Mrs. Briggs wiped tears from her eyes. Mr. Harding shook Eliza's hand with visible relief. Geoffrey left without another word, his barristers trailing behind him like ravens. Adrian stood before the magistrate's bench and felt 8 centuries of Calder ownership dissolve with the stroke of a pen. He had destroyed his inheritance to protect the woman who had earned it, and he felt no regret. The corridor outside the chamber was empty when Eliza found him. She held the signed deed in her hands. She looked at it, then at him. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did. Geoffrey offered you everything back. Geoffrey offered me the same life that let a good man be destroyed without a single question asked. I will not live in that house on those terms." She stepped closer. Her voice was soft. "What will you do now?" "The estate needs a steward. A real one. Someone who will learn what your father knew. Someone who will walk the land every day and know the tenants by name and repair gates before they fail. You are asking for my father's work. I am asking to continue the work I have begun. Under your authority, on your terms." She studied his face. "Why?" "Because it is the only thing I have ever done that mattered." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "One condition. Name it. Your name goes on the county estate register, beside my father's. Thomas Thornton, steward of Stonebridge Park. Adrian Calder, steward of Stonebridge Park. Same page, same roll." He closed his eyes, felt the weight of what she was offering. "It would be an honor I have not earned." "Then earn it." She held out her hand. He took it. They walked out of the magistrate's building together into the cold autumn air. The estate waited. The work waited. They would face it together. The county estate register was amended 3 days later. The clerk recorded both names in careful script. Thomas Thornton, steward of Stonebridge Park, 1781, 1812. Adrian Calder, steward of Stonebridge Park, 1826, present. Same page, same roll. The title of Earl existed elsewhere, in some legal registry that no longer mattered. Here, what mattered was the work. Adrian stood in the county office and looked at his name beside Thomas Thornton's, and felt something settle in his chest, something that had been restless and uncertain for as long as he could remember. He was not an earl anymore. He was a steward, and that was enough. Late autumn arrived. The fields turned gold, then brown. The first frost came and went. The tenants prepared for winter. Eliza walked the western boundary at dawn, as she did every morning. The air was cold and clear. Her breath misted in the pale light. Footsteps sounded behind her. She did not turn. Adrian fell into step beside her. He carried his own notebook now, new entries in his own handwriting, observations and notes, and plans for spring planting. "The south pasture gate needs replacing," she said. "I replaced it yesterday." She stopped, looked at him. "You did not tell me. You did not need to approve it. It needed doing." She almost smiled. He saw it and did not comment. They walked. Frost crunched under their boots. Stonebridge rose behind them. The manor house, the tenant farms, the boundary walls that her father had built, and they were learning to maintain. Her hand brushed his. Neither withdrew. They reached the old stone wall, the wall they had repaired together months ago. The capstone still held. The mortar was solid. "Your father's work has lasted," Adrian said quietly. "So will ours." He turned to face her. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold. Her eyes were steady. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Then tell me. I am not the man I was when I sat in that auction house. I will never be that man again. But I am not yet the man I want to become. I do not know if I will ever be worthy of what you have given me." She reached out, took his hands. They were shaking slightly. She steadied them between her own. "You do not need to be worthy. You need to keep working, keep learning, keep choosing to stay when staying is difficult." She lifted his hands to her mouth, kissed his knuckles, then his wrist, then drew him toward her. The kiss was slow, deliberate. It tasted like frost and morning air, and the quiet certainty of two people who had chosen each other through fire. When they pulled apart, she kept his hands in hers. "Come home," she whispered. "Where is home?" "Wherever we are working." They walked back toward the estate together. The sun rose over the eastern hills. The land stretched before them, 700 acres, tenant farms, timber rights, and all the work that would fill the years ahead. Spring arrived. Morning light filled the estate office. The windows were open. The smell of turned earth and new growth drifted in on the breeze. Eliza sat at her father's desk, reviewing the spring planting schedule. Adrian entered with 2 cups of tea and mud on his boots. He set 1 cup beside her. His fingers brushed her wrist. She caught his hand, pressed her lips to his knuckle, quick, private, and released. "Go," she said softly. "The tenants are waiting." "Yes, ma'am." He smiled. She smiled back. He left. His boots tracked mud across the floor. She would scold him for it later. The iron key hung on a peg by the door. Neither of them carried it anymore. The door was always open. Outside, the fields were green with new wheat. Mrs. Briggs waved from her cottage door. Mr. Hewitt's daughter ran across the yard, healthy and laughing. Stonebridge Park was not perfect. The manor house still needed repairs. Some tenant farms struggled. The accounts were tight, but the land was cared for. The tenants were safe. The work continued. And in the steward's cottage, at the edge of the estate, 2 people who had earned each other through mud and silence, and the slow collapse of every wall built a life from labor and love, and the quiet certainty that what they had made together would last. The key hung by the door. The door was always open, and that was enough.